The first thing Mark noticed that afternoon was how quiet Ethan had become. Usually, the boys humming and off-key singing drifted through the open garage door while Mark worked on his client's carburetors. But today, silence hung heavy in the sweltering air, broken only by the buzz of cicadas and the occasional barking dog down the street. Mark wiped sweat from his brow with an oily rag. The metallic tang of gasoline and grease clung to his hands. Outside, the sun was relentless, beating down on the cracked driveway where Ethan's bike lay tipped over on its side. Its bent handlebars and broken brake cable stabbed guilt into Mark's chest. He had promised to fix it last week, but work kept piling up. He glanced inside the house through the kitchen window. Ethan sat at the dining table, his shoulders shaking as he drew small frantic strokes in his sketchbook. Mark's chest tightened. He set down his wrench and stepped into the kitchen, the cool air from the humming window AC brushing away the oppressive heat. "Hey champ," he said softly. "What's wrong?" Ethan didn't look up. His fingers gripped the pencil so tight his knuckles were white. "She said I'm a criminal, Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "She said I'm gonna go to jail." Mark frowned. "Who said that?" Before Ethan could answer, a shrill voice cut through the quiet. "Mark Dawson." It carried with such practiced command that it startled both of them. He turned to see her standing at the front door, tapping one polished fingernail against the glass. Karen Martin, HOA president. Her platinum hair was pulled into an immovable helmet of curls. Her pink blouse looked freshly steamed, and she clutched her ever-present leather clipboard like it was a royal scepter. He opened the door halfway, blocking her view of Ethan. The smell of her overpowering floral perfume mixed uncomfortably with the summer's humidity. "What is it, Karen?" he asked evenly, though his pulse already quickened in irritation. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Your son vandalized the community's flower beds yesterday evening. He tore up the azaleas and spray-painted the HOA sign by the entrance. Several residents saw him. This behavior is criminal, Mark." "Criminal?" He blinked, trying to process the accusation. Behind him, Ethan whimpered. Mark turned slightly to shield him further from her glare. "You're saying Ethan did what?" Karen raised an immaculately drawn brow. "Don't play dumb. He's been a troublemaker since you moved in. I've already prepared a fine of $5,000 for property damage and defacement. Additionally, I'll be notifying Child Protective Services if you don't address this delinquent behavior immediately." Mark felt the air leave his lungs for a moment. $5,000? For flowers and a sign? And CPS? His eyes narrowed. "Karen, Ethan was home all evening yesterday. He was working on his art project." Her thin lips curled into something that might have been a smile on someone else. "Oh, come now. Children lie to protect themselves. If you discipline him instead of letting him run wild, he wouldn't be destroying public property." Ethan let out a small sob, his shoulders shaking harder. Mark could feel the anger simmering beneath his ribs, rising fast and hot, but he kept his voice calm. "Do you have any proof it was him?" Karen tilted her head, feigning pity. "The proof is in the eyewitness accounts. My friend saw him. That's all we need." Mark's jaw clenched. He knew exactly who she meant by friends. Her personal HOA committee lapdogs, eager to please her and secure their spots on next year's board. The same people who measured lawn heights with rulers when she asked. "Karen," he said, forcing his voice to remain level, "I'll handle this. You can leave now." She gave a short, triumphant nod. "Make sure you do. Otherwise, the board will pursue all consequences available under our community regulations." Her gaze slid past him, landing on Ethan with cold, sharp disgust. "Maybe if you raised your son properly, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Mark shut the door before she could say another word. The smell of her perfume lingered in the entryway like poison. He turned and crouched in front of Ethan, who had curled into himself, tears dotting his sketchbook paper. "Look at me, bud," Mark said softly. Ethan hesitated, then raised his red, puffy eyes. "Did you do any of what she's saying?" "No, Dad," Ethan choked out. "I was drawing all day. I didn't even go past the driveway. Please believe me." Mark wrapped his arms around him, pulling him close. Hey, I always believe you. Always. Don't listen to what she says." Outside, Karen's heels clicked sharply on the pavement as she strode away. Mark could almost hear her smug thoughts echoing with each step. His son a vandal. His son a criminal. The rage pressed down on his chest like a physical weight. He stayed like that for several minutes, holding Ethan tightly until the boy's trembling eased. He smelled his son's hair, faint with pencil shavings and shampoo, and felt an unbreakable resolve building inside him. He would not let Karen ruin Ethan's life with her lies and threats. He would not let her walk around with that cruel smile and unearned power. As Ethan sniffled quietly against his shirt, Mark's eyes burned with determination. She thought this was over. That she could accuse his boy, humiliate him, fine them into obedience. But she had just made a mistake she couldn't take back. He kissed Ethan's hair and stood, his hand ruffling the boy's dark curls. "Don't worry, champ. We're gonna fix your bike tomorrow, okay?" Ethan nodded, wiping his face. "Okay." Mark glanced out the window, watching Karen's figure grow smaller as she crossed the street back to her house, clipboard swinging confidently. He felt the deep, simmering calm of a man pushed too far settle into his bones. She didn't know it yet, but she had just declared war on the wrong father. He picked up his wrench again and returned to the garage, rolling up his sleeves as he stared at the broken brake cable. The cicadas droned louder outside, the sun burning low and red through the trees. A quiet promise settled in his chest, hard and cold. She was about to find out exactly what he was capable of when someone threatened his family. Mark woke before dawn the next morning, his mind already turning with thoughts of Karen's accusations. The kitchen clock read 5:13 a.m. He made coffee, its bitter scent filling the silent house. Ethan was still asleep upstairs, curled under his dinosaur blanket, breathing softly. Mark looked at his son's closed door for a moment before sighing and turning away. By 7 the neighborhood was awake. Garage doors opened, sprinklers rotated across manicured lawns, and joggers passed with earbuds in. Mark watched them from his porch, steaming mug in hand, feeling a tight knot in his chest. The idea of Ethan being labeled a criminal clawed at him like rust eating away steel. He wouldn't let that stand. He showered quickly and changed into jeans and a pressed gray polo. When Ethan woke, Mark helped him pour cereal, trying to keep his voice light, but Ethan just stirred the flakes around, not eating. His eyes were dim, as if something had been switched off inside him. "I'll be back in a bit, champ," Mark said, ruffling his hair. "Finish your breakfast and then work on your drawings, okay?" Ethan only nodded, spoon clinking against the bowl. Outside, the July air was already warm and humming with cicadas. Mark walked down the street toward the HOA office, each step crunching on stray gravel. The office sat at the edge of the community pool, a squat tan building with tinted windows and a perfectly trimmed hedge out front. Above the door, a brass plaque read, "Whispering Oaks Community Association," in proud serif letters. Inside, the cold blast of AC hit him instantly. The smell of burnt coffee and stale air freshener lingered. Faded notices lined the corkboard wall. Pool hours, landscaping reminders, fines for trash bins left in view. At the front desk sat Janice, a meek woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun. She looked up with watery blue eyes and offered a cautious smile. "Morning, Mr. Dawson. Here to pay your dues?" she asked. "Morning, Janice. No, I need to speak with Karen." Janice winced slightly. "She's in her office." "Thanks." Mark walked down the narrow carpeted hallway. Light flickered overhead where a fluorescent bulb was dying. At the last door, the frosted glass panel read, "Karen Martin, HOA President." He knocked once, firmly. "Come in," her voice called, clipped and impatient. He stepped inside. Karen sat behind a wide cherrywood desk, tapping on her phone. She wore a turquoise blouse today, chunky gold earrings swinging as she moved. Her perfume was suffocating in the small office, blending sickly sweet flowers with alcohol notes. "Mark," she said, not looking up. "I'm very busy today. HOA budget reviews." "I'll be quick," he replied evenly. "I want to see the proof." That got her attention. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and gleaming with cold amusement. "Proof of what?" "Of Ethan vandalizing the flowers and sign." Karen set her phone down slowly, folding her manicured hands over a stack of papers. "Several residents saw him, Mark. That's proof enough. I want names. I want statements. I want to see exactly who claimed this." She tilted her head, lips curving into a patronizing smile. "Mark, this isn't a courtroom. It's a community board. We don't need sworn affidavits. My committee members witnessed it. That's sufficient. And if your committee members are lying to protect someone else?" His voice dropped lower, steel underlying each word. Karen chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Are you accusing the HOA committee of conspiracy now? My goodness. You really are desperate to avoid responsibility. Maybe if you didn't coddle Ethan so much, he wouldn't act out." "He didn't act out. He didn't do it." Her smile vanished, replaced by cold irritation. "You are being fined $5,000. If you fail to pay within 30 days, a lien will be filed against your house." Additionally, if this behavior continues, I will have no choice but to notify Child Protective Services. A child running around destroying property shows neglect, don't you think? Mark's fists clenched at his sides. Heat rose to his face, his pulse drumming in his ears, but he forced himself to remain calm. Bursting out in rage would only confirm her narrative of him as an unstable parent. He drew in a slow breath. Karen, you're making a mistake. She picked up her phone again, dismissing him with a flick of her eyes. The only mistake is parents thinking their children can do no wrong. Now if you'll excuse me, some of us actually contribute to this community. He turned and walked out without another word. Janice looked up as he passed, her eyes full of quiet sympathy. Mark couldn't bring himself to meet her gaze. The fluorescent light in the hallway flickered again, humming like an angry wasp. Outside, the sun was bright and blinding. He stood in the parking lot for a moment, feeling the weight of the morning settle onto his shoulders. Around him, neighbors walked their dogs or carried towels to the pool, smiling and chatting, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the calm suburban veneer. As he walked home, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a text from Ethan's school. "Hello, Mr. Dawson. Just wanted to inform you that Ethan was involved in an incident at recess today. Another student called him a vandal and Ethan became upset. He's okay now, but we thought you should be aware." Mark stopped walking. The cicadas roared in the trees overhead, the heat pressing down like a hand against his chest. His son. Being bullied at school over something he didn't even do. Being called a criminal by his neighbors. Being threatened with losing his home by an HOA president drunk on power. He tucked his phone back into his pocket and continued walking, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the house, Ethan was curled up on the couch, hugging his sketchbook to his chest, pencil clutched tight in one small hand. He looked up as Mark entered, his eyes rimmed red. "Dad?" he whispered, voice cracking. "Am I a bad kid?" The question split Mark's heart wide open. He crossed the room and sat beside Ethan, pulling him close, feeling his son's thin shoulders trembling. "No," he said softly, fiercely. "You're the best kid I know." Ethan sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "She hates me." Mark felt the anger bloom inside him like molten iron. He brushed Ethan's hair back from his forehead, staring into his son's tearful eyes. "She doesn't matter," he said, his voice trembling with quiet rage. "I promise you, buddy, she is never going to hurt you again." Ethan pressed his face into Mark's side, holding tight. Mark wrapped his arm around him and stared out the window, past the blooming crepe myrtles and freshly cut lawns, to the neighborhood that had turned against them so easily. Karen thought this was finished, that she had won. That he would simply pay her fine, swallow her insults, and let his son carry the shame of a crime he didn't commit. She was wrong. Because Mark knew something Karen didn't. Something that would make her regret ever crossing his family. And as he held his son tighter, a grim determination settled into his bones. She wanted to play games. Fine. Let's play. That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Mark sat alone in the living room with only the ticking wall clock for company. The house was dark except for the faint glow of the porch light filtering through the blinds. He sipped lukewarm coffee, staring at nothing, feeling his anger simmer beneath the surface like an underground fire. He replayed Karen's threats in his head, her smug voice calling Ethan a criminal, threatening CPS, fining them $5,000 without proof. His jaw clenched. He wasn't going to let this stand. He wouldn't allow his son to carry this stain. He had promised Ethan that morning, and he was a man who kept his word. Mark set down his mug and walked to the hall closet. He reached behind the coats and pulled out a locked black metal box. Inside was his small collection of security hard drives. 2 years ago, after a string of petty thefts in the neighborhood, he had installed cameras around the house and driveway. Karen had hated them, saying they were an eyesore that destroyed the community's aesthetic, but Mark hadn't cared then, and he sure as hell didn't care now. He carried the box to his garage workbench and plugged the hard drive into his laptop. The smell of old motor oil and cut metal clung to the cool night air around him. For the next hour, he scrubbed through footage, his eyes scanning each frame for Ethan's movements. Finally, at 4:32 p.m. the previous day, he saw his son riding his bike down the sidewalk, humming softly, ponytail of brown hair bouncing behind his helmet. Ethan parked the bike by the garage, pulled off his helmet, and walked inside holding his sketchbook. Mark's heart ached watching him so carefree before this nightmare had begun. He kept scrolling. 10 minutes later, movement flickered on the screen. A taller figure emerged from the left side, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up despite the heat. The figure walked briskly down the sidewalk toward the HOA sign at the community entrance. Mark leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. The figure pulled a can of spray paint from their pocket and shook it, the rattling audible even on the muted footage. Then they bent and began spraying a crude black tag across the lower panel of the sign. Mark froze the footage and zoomed in, studying the boy's face as he turned slightly toward the street. His pulse quickened. Bleached blonde tips on brown hair stuck out from under the hoodie. The camera caught the side of his sneakers, red with a white lightning bolt design. Mark's mind flashed back to HOA pool parties, seeing those exact shoes running around the deck. It was Brandon, Karen's son. Mark exhaled shakily, a grim smile spreading across his face. Relief rushed through him so hard he almost laughed out loud. His fingers flew across the trackpad, isolating the clip and exporting the footage. He grabbed a stack of printer paper and printed several clear still images showing Brandon's face, hair, and the can of paint in his hand. When the printer stopped humming, Mark gathered the papers, holding them for a moment under the harsh fluorescent light. Brandon's smirking teenage face stared back at him, immortalized in glossy ink. "Got you," Mark whispered into the silent garage. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table, the footage looping silently on his laptop screen as he imagined every possible outcome. The sun was rising by the time he dressed in dark jeans and a clean navy t-shirt. He poured Ethan a bowl of cereal, kissing the top of his head as he passed, then tucked the printed photos into a slim leather folder. "Where are you going, Dad?" Ethan asked quietly. Mark turned, smiling softly. "Just taking care of something for us, champ." He left the house and walked down the street, heart thumping hard with each step. The cicadas buzzed loud in the morning heat, and sprinklers hissed across lawns already baking in the sun. When he reached the HOA building, he paused outside the glass door. Through it, he saw Karen sitting at the conference table with 5 committee members. Her clipboard was on the table, her lips moving rapidly as she lectured them on community maintenance. Mark pushed the door open. The scent of burnt coffee, cheap printer ink, and her choking floral perfume hit him like a wall. The room fell silent as every head turned his way. Karen's eyes narrowed, annoyance flashing across her heavily lined face. "Mark," she said sharply. "We're in the middle of a meeting." "I won't take long," he replied calmly, stepping inside. His boots thudded heavily against the thin carpet as he crossed to the table. Karen leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "If you're here to argue about your son's fine, I assure you, I'm not here to argue." Mark pulled the folder from under his arm and laid it on the table with deliberate slowness. "I'm here to show you what really happened." She frowned as he flipped open the folder, sliding the glossy photos across the polished wood. Her eyes darted down, skimming them quickly. The committee members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from boredom to confusion to shock. "See that?" Mark's voice was low and measured. "That's not Ethan. That's Brandon. Your son." Karen's face turned pale beneath her makeup. Her mouth opened and closed, no words forming. One of the committee members, a tall man with a military buzz cut, picked up a photo and studied it. "That's definitely Brandon," he said flatly. "I've seen those shoes 100 times at the pool." Karen's hand trembled as she snatched the papers back, eyes scanning desperately for any flaw or blur to deny the evidence staring her in the face. This could be anyone. Hoodies hide faces. "Check the hair tips," Mark interrupted coldly. "Check the shoes. And if you need more, I've got the entire video saved here." He tapped his phone in his pocket. "I'll be uploading it to the neighborhood Facebook group later today, along with an explanation of how you tried to blame an innocent 10-year-old for your own son's vandalism." The room fell silent. A faint hum from the AC vent was the only sound. Karen's breathing grew ragged, her eyes flicking to each committee member as if searching for someone to jump to her defense, but their gazes remained locked on the photos, their expressions hardening by the second. Mark straightened, looking down at her with quiet fury boiling just under his calm words. "My son cried himself to sleep because of your lies. You threatened to take him from his home. You called him a criminal. And all along you were protecting your own." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her fingers clawed at the papers, crumpling the edges, her knuckles white. Mark turned and walked out without waiting for her reply. The morning sun hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk, blinding and warm. He felt lighter than he had in days, though rage still burned deep in his chest, feeding his resolve for what came next. As he walked home, neighbors tending their flower beds glanced up and waved. Mark nodded back, his mind already working. Karen thought humiliation was the worst thing that could happen to her. She was about to learn there were far worse things than shame. He smiled to himself as he crossed his driveway and heard Ethan humming softly inside. The real game was just beginning. Mark didn't sleep much that night. After confronting Karen, he spent the evening in his garage, sorting tools he didn't need to sort, wiping down surfaces already clean. The rhythmic scrape of cloth against metal calmed him, helped him think clearly. He kept replaying her expression when she saw the photos. The flicker of fear, the dawning horror, the desperate denial. It wasn't enough. Not yet. The next morning dawned hot and heavy. A hazy sun rose over the whispering oaks lining the neighborhood streets. Mark woke Ethan with a gentle shake. The boy blinked sleepily, his hair sticking up at odd angles, eyes still shadowed from too many nights of tears. "Morning, champ," Mark said softly. "I've got something planned today." Ethan frowned. "Am I in trouble again?" Mark's heart twisted at the question. "No, buddy. Today is going to be a good day." Ethan nodded silently and crawled out of bed, hugging his sketchbook to his chest as he walked to the kitchen. Mark made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, drizzling syrup carefully over their backs. Ethan gave a small smile when he saw them, and for the first time in days, he ate without needing to be coaxed. After breakfast, Mark sent Ethan to his room to draw while he set up his laptop on the dining table. His fingers moved quickly, uploading the security footage to the neighborhood Facebook group, adding a short caption. "For those concerned about the recent vandalism. Here's the truth." He sat back and watched as comments began appearing within seconds. "Wait, is that Brandon Martin? Oh my God, Karen blamed the Dawson boy for this? This is disgusting. Poor Ethan. I knew that kid was trouble." Within 15 minutes, his phone buzzed with a text from Janice at the HOA office. "Mark, please come to the emergency board meeting at 10 a.m. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Then he called Ethan over and ruffled his hair. "Want to help me fix your bike today after lunch?" Ethan's eyes brightened. "Really? Really? But first, I need to take care of something." When Mark walked into the HOA office at 10 sharp, the tension in the room felt electric. Karen sat stiff-backed at the head of the table, lips pressed into a thin white line. Her makeup looked heavier than usual, almost like armor. Around her, the 5 committee members whispered to each other, shooting quick glances between her and Mark. He sat down without waiting to be invited. Karen cleared her throat. "Mark, the video you posted this morning was the truth," he finished calmly. She flinched as if slapped. "You had no right to upload private footage of a minor to a public forum. You had no right to falsely accuse my son of a crime he didn't commit," he countered. His voice was quiet, controlled, but each word landed like a hammer. One of the committee members, a stern woman with short black hair and reading glasses perched low on her nose, leaned forward. "Karen, is it true? That this was Brandon?" Karen's eyes darted from face to face, searching for support. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. He must have been pressured. He would never do something like this on his own. Mark's son is a bad influence." "That's enough," interrupted the man with the buzz cut. His tone left no room for argument. "Karen, you threatened to report Mark to CPS. You fined him $5,000 without investigation. You publicly humiliated a 10-year-old child based on lies." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her eyes welled with frustrated tears that she quickly blinked away. The other committee members looked away, their silence louder than any condemnation. Mark folded his hands on the table, feeling their gazes shift to him. "I don't want an apology," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I want accountability. For Ethan. For me. For everyone here who's ever been threatened with fines or shamed into silence by this board." Silence stretched thick across the room until Janice spoke from the corner, her voice trembling but firm. "The bylaws allow us to call for an immediate vote to remove a sitting president if gross misconduct is proven." Karen's eyes snapped to her. "You can't do this. You need me. This community needs structure." "It needs honesty," Janice said softly. The vote was called. One by one the hands rose. All 5 committee members voted for removal. Karen sat frozen, hands clutching the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles blanched. Her breathing grew ragged as the reality settled in. "You can't," she whispered. "I built this community. I made it safe." "You made it yours," Mark corrected quietly. "Not safe." Tears slipped down her cheeks, streaking her foundation. For a moment Mark almost felt pity. Almost. "You have until the end of today to clear out your office," Janice said softly. Karen stood abruptly, scraping her chair against the carpet, and fled the room without looking back. The heavy glass door swung shut behind her, rattling in its frame. The committee sat in stunned silence until the buzz-cut man exhaled and muttered, "Well, that was overdue." Mark stood to leave. As he stepped into the sunlight outside, the heat hit him like a wall. He took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Across the street, Karen's SUV sat parked under the oak trees. She stood beside it, shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. He watched her for a moment, the anger inside him cooling into something distant and final. He turned away and walked home. Ethan sat on the porch steps with his sketchbook open on his knees, pencil moving quickly as he shaded a dragon's wing. When he saw Mark, his eyes lit up. "Did it work, Dad?" he asked softly. Mark smiled and ruffled his hair. "It worked." Ethan grinned and went back to his drawing, humming under his breath. The tune drifted up into the summer air, mingling with the rustling leaves and distant barking dogs. Mark sat beside him, watching his son's pencil strokes build scales and claws and fierce determined eyes. Later that afternoon, as they repaired Ethan's bike together in the garage, neighbors walked by and waved. Some stopped to say how sorry they were, how brave Ethan was, how proud they were to have Mark in the community. He nodded politely, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle deep in his chest. As the sun set behind the oaks, casting long golden shadows across their driveway, Mark wiped grease from his hands and turned to Ethan. "Ready to ride again tomorrow, champ?" Ethan grinned, his eyes bright with hope again. "Yeah. Can we go to the park?" Mark chuckled softly. "Anywhere you want, buddy." He watched as Ethan wheeled his bike inside and thought about Karen, alone in her house, her power stripped away, her throne gone. The war was over. Justice had been served. And for the first time in days, Mark felt peace. He closed the garage door against the darkening sky, the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting on the warm breeze. Tomorrow would be a good day. The first of many. Because when you fight for truth with everything you have, the world finds a way to set itself right. And when someone comes for your child, there is no force on earth that can save them from what comes next.